Is this what Jesus Christ really looked like?
The Jesus we see in many churches today, if not most, is very different from what he actually looked like.
What did Jesus truly look like? The Bible offers almost no details, leaving centuries of speculation and imagination. But then, out of the shadows of history comes an unexpected document, a letter ascribed to Pontius Pilate himself, the Roman governor who condemned Jesus. This letter paints a vivid portrait, describing features and a presence that no one anticipated, stirring questions historians still grapple with today. Imagine a Roman official, trained in the business of judgment and power, struggling to capture the face of a man whose look carried an authority far beyond physical strength. Pilate's enigmatic letter. The question of what Jesus looked like has puzzled historians, theologians, and believers for centuries. The Gospels themselves offer almost no physical description, leaving a blank slate for imagination and folklore. Yet, beyond the biblical texts, a unique and mysterious document emerges, an ancient letter attributed to Pontius Pilate, the Roman governor who condemned Jesus to crucifixion. This letter claims to describe Jesus' face in vivid detail, placing a human portrait in the hands of history that few expect. This letter is striking because it comes not from a disciple or follower, but from a Roman bureaucrat, accustomed to judging criminals, agitators, and political threats. Unlike the Gospel writers, Pilate was trained to be pragmatic and detached, which makes his reported observations about Jesus all the more intriguing. It raises the question, why did such a man feel compelled to write about Jesus' appearance and presence at all? The letter's survival through centuries only deepens the mystery. Historians remain divided about the letter's authenticity. Some argue it reflects a genuine early tradition, possibly preserving eyewitness impressions or official records. Others suspect it was created later by Christian authors wishing to fill gaps in the story or to provide a more relatable image of Jesus for early believers. Regardless of its origins, the letter stands out for its unusual tone. Far from myth or exaltation, it offers a grounded human description. The letter notably avoids presenting Jesus as a supernaturally perfect figure. Instead, it focuses on details that suggest an ordinary man with certain distinctive traits. This practical tone contrasts with other ancient Christian writings that emphasize divinity over humanity. It's as if Pilate, or whoever wrote in his name, tried to convey a lived experience, not a legend, making the account compelling and unusual. This revelation sets the stage for deeper questions. Who was this man that a Roman prefect found so perplexing and memorable? How did Jesus' appearance affect those like Pilate, trained to detect threats? The letter hints that what made Jesus stand out was not just what he looked like, but what his presence conveyed, inviting us to look beyond surface impressions. While many ancient texts focus on miracles or teachings, this letter's focus on the face itself feels intimate, personal. It offers a rare glimpse of Jesus as a tangible person, someone Pilate could see, observe, and attempt to understand. Such a perspective invites fresh reflection on the human element within the biblical narrative. Intrigue builds because this letter is not widely known nor embraced in mainstream Christian history. It offers insights that have rarely been explored in depth, challenging long-held assumptions about how Jesus was perceived by those who witnessed him firsthand. The details within promise to add color and nuance to a figure often veiled in mystery. The existence of this letter invites us to reconsider Jesus' story from the vantage point of a Roman governor caught between power and conscience. It suggests a man trying to find words for an encounter that defied his expectations and roles. This unresolved tension will unfold further as we explore the world Pilate inhabited. The complexities of Jerusalem under Roman control created a pressure cooker where every meeting, including Pilate's with Jesus, carried immense weight and consequence. Jerusalem under Roman rule. Jerusalem in the early 1st century was a city of contrasts and tensions, a sacred space occupied by an imperial force heavily invested in maintaining order. In around the year 30 AD, when Jesus was brought before Pilate, the city was ruled by Rome through regional governors, tasked with suppressing rebellion and unrest. It was a place thick with political intrigue, religious fervor, and social unrest. Every festival, procession, and sermon carried the potential to ignite conflict between the Jewish population and the occupying authorities. Pontius Pilate arrived in Judea as prefect around the year 26 AD, stepping into a challenging role. His primary responsibility was to keep peace in an environment rife with agitators, zealots, and factions opposing Roman rule. Pilate was no stranger to brutality or political maneuvering. He had dealt with countless threats and criminals before Jesus appeared on his radar. Yet Jesus did not fit neatly into any category Pilate had encountered. The city's atmosphere was volatile, and Pilate's court was a place where accusations could quickly escalate into violence. Religious leaders held significant sway and were often at odds both with Rome and with each other. This dynamic made governing Jerusalem an exercise in balancing acts and tactical decisions. Pilate frequently found himself caught between demands for justice and political expediency. Religious festivals like Passover were especially dangerous times when crowds surged and tensions peaked. It was during one such period that Jesus was arrested and brought before Pilate. The governor was familiar with seditious figures, rabble-rousers, and those who claimed kingship in ways threatening to Rome. He had seen many accused men plead, bargain, or curse, and he expected similar behavior. But Jesus, described in the letter Pilate allegedly wrote, was unlike these typical troublemakers. Despite the crowds he gathered and the messages he preached, Jesus spoke of a kingdom not bound by armies or violence. He healed the sick and challenged the religious elite without inciting the kind of rebellions Pilate was trained to confront. This unfamiliarity with the expected forms of threat disturbed the prefect. The city's political and religious leaders found in Jesus a problem they could not easily control, and they pushed Pilate to act. Pilate, meanwhile, wrestled with this challenge of interpreting a man who defied the usual categories. His role demanded holding the peace, but Jesus' bold claims and growing following tested the limits of Roman governance. Beneath it all, the city's sacred identity clashed with the harsh realities of occupation. Pilate had to govern a people fiercely committed to their religious laws and traditions while representing a foreign empire indifferent to those beliefs. This tension was palpable and influenced every decision and encounter, especially the trial of Jesus. Because Pilate did not just see a prisoner, he saw a man who challenged everything he thought he knew about power and truth. Pilate's unique encounter with Jesus. When Jesus was brought before Pilate, it was a meeting unlike any other the governor had experienced. Pilate was accustomed to facing outspoken rebels, desperate criminals, and agitators yelling for freedom or vengeance. Yet Jesus was different, calm, silent at times, speaking only when necessary, and never wielding his influence through threat or force. This contrast unsettled Pilate more than any shouted accusation or defiant gesture. The letter attributed to Pilate reveals his confusion and intrigue. He did not classify Jesus as a typical enemy of Rome. Instead, Jesus presented a puzzle, a man gathering crowds without promising war, teaching about a kingdom that wasn't political, and healing without charge or fame. For a governor trained to detect danger and suppress sedition, Jesus represented something new and unfamiliar. Pilate's interrogation emphasizes this unique impression. When he asked, "Are you the king of the Jews?" Jesus responded not with defiance or claim, but with a statement revealing a kingdom not of this world. This answer defied Pilate's expectations and understanding of political rebellion. The governor, trained in realpolitik and control, was faced with a spiritual mystery he could not categorize. The letter hints at Pilate's struggle to reconcile the authority Jesus commanded with the absence of conventional power. Jesus was bound and powerless in the eyes of the empire, yet somehow he radiated a freedom and authority that challenged Pilate's own. This paradox left Pilate perplexed, torn between the law he enforced and the sense of something greater before him. Historical texts describe Pilate as a man sometimes brutal, sometimes cautious, but always pragmatic. Yet, standing before Jesus seems to have sparked a rare moment of hesitation and reflection. Unlike other cases where Pilate swiftly condemned or acquitted, Here he wrestled openly with justice, truth, and the expectations of his office. Despite recognizing Jesus' innocence 3 times, Pilate ultimately surrendered to external pressure. This conflict was not just political, but personal. The letter reveals a man haunted by what he saw, but hesitant to act against the crowd's will and his own ambitions. Jesus' presence exposed the limitations of Pilate's power and the ambiguity of his role as judge. He stood before a man who was both condemned and strangely authoritative, a man whose message transcended political categories. The governor's encounter with Jesus was transformative in its uncertainty and complexity. This moment remains one of history's great ironies. The most powerful man in Jerusalem unable to comprehend the true nature of the prisoner before him. This inability to understand fueled the profound weight behind the letter Pilate is said to have written. To uncover the full richness of that portrayal, one must look closely at how the letter describes Jesus' very appearance. Detailed physical description. The letter attributed to Pilate offers a rare and surprisingly intimate portrayal of Jesus' physical appearance, a description grounded in human detail rather than mythic grandeur. According to this account, Jesus' hair is described as having the tone of ripe hazelnuts, a warm brown shade that falls naturally over his shoulders. It was slightly wavy, not tied up like some Jewish teachers of the time, giving a sense of humble simplicity rather than formal prestige or ostentation. This choice of words evokes an image of someone approachable, someone who did not seek status through outward appearance. His beard, the letter notes, was thick yet well kept, projecting an impression of serenity rather than neglect. This contrasts sharply with some contemporary depictions of ascetic figures or harsh zealots who might shun grooming. Instead, Jesus appears as a man who maintained his appearance with calm dignity, embodying quiet strength. The attention to these small features suggests that the author aimed to describe a real, relatable person rather than an ethereal or supernatural being. The description extends to his skin tone, which reflects the typical complexion of those living under the Galilean sun. The letter explicitly mentions a warm tone, neither the pale skin associated with Romans nor the dark complexion some might expect, but something in between. The skin of a man who walked the dusty roads between villages, touched by both sun and labor. This detail roots Jesus firmly in his geographical and cultural context, emphasizing his humanity and the life he lived day to day. This grounded depiction challenges many traditional images that have often idealized Jesus with features unfamiliar to Middle Eastern history. Instead, the letter invites us to see him through the eyes of someone encountering a flesh-and-blood man, shaped by his environment and his family heritage. The portrayal is intentionally modest, avoiding the trappings of royalty or kingly power, aligning with prophetic descriptions of a humble and unassuming servant. What makes this description captivating is that it comes from a Roman governor, a man not invested in promoting Christian faith, but rather in making sense of an event, and a man who defied any simple political label. The letter's restrained tone adds authenticity, as it neither embellishes nor diminishes Jesus, but presents him as someone whose appearance naturally reflected the life he led, ordinary yet somehow extraordinary. The letter's depiction turns visual stereotypes on their head. Jesus is not painted as a striking warrior or imposing leader, but as a man whose appeal went beyond physical charisma. His features projected calm and reassurance rather than intimidation, sparking curiosity and connection rather than fear or awe. This realness helps explain why Pilate might have found it difficult to categorize him as a threat. In a world full of pomp and politics, Jesus' appearance was unpretentious, embedded in the tangible reality of daily toil and simple living. His looks spoke not of worldly power but of inner conviction and compassion, a quality that silently commanded respect and attention. These details add a new layer of understanding to who Jesus was beyond theological debate. This vivid physical sketch prepares us to appreciate what the letter describes next: the eyes of Jesus, which seem to carry a deeper significance that transcends mere appearance and touches the soul of those who met him.
He had a physical appearance. I knew he was more than a man, but he was a perfect man. I always say I couldn't look away from his face. His face was the most important thing because of the joy and the love coming from his eyes.
Looking closely at Jesus' gaze reveals a depth that stirred profound reactions in Pilate and many others. The gaze that transcended words. The letter's description of Jesus' eyes moves beyond simple observation into territory that language struggles to contain. A look described as simultaneously filled with authority and compassion. It's not just the color or shape that mattered. It was the effect those eyes had on the viewer, a sensation that Pilate apparently found difficult to articulate fully in Latin. This gaze made those who met it feel completely seen, understood, and yet free from judgment, a rare combination in any encounter. The letter clarifies that this was not the cold, detached stare of a judge, nor the fierce glare of a general. Instead, Jesus' eyes conveyed empathy, a deep perception that touched the very core of the onlooker's being. This quality made people feel as if they were being truly recognized for who they were, not merely evaluated or condemned. Such a gaze would naturally disrupt the ordinary dynamics of power, creating tension for someone like Pilate, accustomed to assessing threats with clarity and distance. This portrayal aligns remarkably well with gospel narratives, where Jesus' gaze often plays a transformative role.
What is the meaning of the story of the woman with the issue of blood? What we know about the woman is, first, she had a bleeding condition, and the issue had continued for 12 years. That's a very long time.
For instance, in Luke's Gospel, the story of the woman with a 12-year bleeding condition highlights Jesus noticing and acknowledging a person overwhelmed by fear and anonymity. His act of making her visible and valued within a crowd captures exactly what this letter tries to express in more guarded, almost poetic terms. The eyes become a symbol of Jesus' unique authority, not a political or military dominance, but one rooted in love and understanding. They compel people to confront themselves honestly, yet without the harshness of condemnation. Such a gaze challenges traditional forms of control and invites something altogether different: invitation and acceptance. For Pilate, who lived in a world dominated by brutality, suspicion, and power plays, this was an unsettling experience. It was a look that transcended his training and expectations, a silent challenge to his role as executor of justice and enforcer of law. The letter hints at this profound dissonance, the tension between the authority Jesus exercised without force and Pilate's impotence in the face of something he could neither grasp nor oppose.
There's an ancient letter that shows Pilate wrote to Emperor Tiberius about Jesus. Very much like a governor sending a "you won't believe what just happened here" report to his boss.
This gaze not only unsettled Pilate, but also left an imprint on everyone who witnessed it. It redefined encounter in a way rarely recorded in history. The power of those eyes was not in commanding submission, but in evoking transformation, an experience tied to the core message Jesus embodied. The impact of Jesus' gaze endures, inviting reflection on what it means to truly see and be seen. Those eyes remain a metaphor for connection beyond appearances, reminding us that the essence of recognition lies in understanding and grace. This is the core of the letter's remarkable testimony, made all the more remarkable by its unlikely author. The remarkable description of Jesus' eyes beckons us to imagine what it must have been like to face such a gaze, the combination of authority tempered by compassion, holding both challenge and comfort. This delicate balance is essential for grasping how Jesus interacted with the world and why his presence disturbed so many, yet healed even more. Such a gaze sets the stage to question the nature of truth and power as Pilate wrestled with Jesus' claims and identity in the moments that followed. Historical debates and authenticity. The letter attributed to Pontius Pilate has long sparked intense debate among historians and scholars. Its authenticity remains controversial, with some experts arguing that the document reflects an early, perhaps genuine, tradition dating back close to the time of Jesus. They suggest it might preserve oral memories or official records, offering a rare glimpse through the eyes of a Roman official who witnessed the events firsthand. If true, it would provide an invaluable contemporary insight into Jesus' appearance and character. Others, however, view the letter skeptically. They insist it was likely composed later by Christians aiming to fill gaps in biblical narratives or to humanize Jesus by grounding his image in relatable details. Scholars point out stylistic and linguistic clues, suggesting the text might be a product of creative theological reflection rather than an authentic record. Despite these doubts, this letter remains significant for the way it shaped perceptions by highlighting Jesus' humanity in a way rare for ancient texts. The debate also touches on the broader challenge of distinguishing historical fragments from devotional writings in early Christian literature. Many documents circulated in the centuries following Jesus' death, blending fact, memory, and faith. This letter, however, stands apart because it claims the voice of a Roman governor, rather than of followers or later church leaders, which adds an unusual layer of complexity to its analysis. Some enthusiasts argue that even if the letter is not literally Pilate's own writing, it may reflect genuine eyewitness testimony preserved by early communities. This notion points to the value of oral tradition and the way stories passed through generations can contain kernels of historical truth wrapped in narrative form. Such a view opens the door to appreciating the letter not just as a document, but as a cultural artifact, revealing how early Christians understood Jesus. The letter's tone and detail have impressed many scholars because they avoid supernatural exaggeration. Instead, they focus on tangible human traits. This restraint lends the document a convincing realism, making it compelling whether or not it is authentic in a strict historical sense. It feels rooted in an attempt to portray a recognizable, flesh-and-blood figure rather than an idealized deity. Historical scrutiny also kind of looks at the political and literary context of Pilate's governorship, which was full of conflict and intrigue. If you try to understand Pilate's mindset as a provincial official responsible for keeping order, it begins to make sense why an account attributed to him might sound careful, pragmatic even. His supposed recitation of Jesus' trial, with the description of Jesus' demeanor and his physical appearance, hints at a real effort to explain something that even one of Rome's main agents found puzzling. Now, historians can't really prove the letter as such, yet its survival and the fact that people still stay interested in it says a lot about a basic human impulse: to connect with Jesus in a way that feels more immediate, less abstract. The letter stresses that Jesus was a person who lived in an actual place, in actual time, something seen through the eyes of someone from the other side of history. And because its status is ambiguous, it pushes us to think about not only who Jesus was, but also how we remember, and how we record these encounters that feel so intense. Debate aside, the letter's presence also makes you pause at the boundaries between history and faith. It nudges us to recognize how narrative power shapes collective memory, sometimes quietly, sometimes decisively. It also shows just how hard it can be to separate concrete facts from the spiritual weight people later attached to Jesus across the centuries. That same friction, or tension, ends up enriching our sense of how stories change and why certain images keep enduring. This blend of historical inquiry and spiritual inquiry naturally leads us to reflect on the prophetic connections tied to Jesus' appearance and what those ancient texts might reveal about the meaning behind his humble visage. Theological and prophetic connections. The description of Jesus in the letter attributed to Pilate unexpectedly echoes ancient prophetic writings, especially those found in Isaiah's texts, which early Christians recognized as foretelling the Messiah's nature. Isaiah 53, 2-3 famously describes the coming servant as someone without beauty or majesty to attract us to him, a man despised and rejected, acquainted with grief and sorrow. This prophecy frames expectations not of a regal or heroic figure, but of one marked by humility and suffering. Pilate's letter aligns closely with this vision, portraying Jesus not as an imposing leader or strikingly handsome figure, but as a simple carpenter whose authority radiates from within. This contrast between external appearance and internal power runs throughout Scripture, emphasizing that Jesus' impact came from his character and spiritual presence rather than physical grandeur. The letter's grounded description resonates deeply with these long-standing prophetic themes. These theological connections reinforce the idea that Jesus' authority was not worldly, but spiritual. A kingdom not of this world, as Jesus himself declared before Pilate. This kingdom challenges conventional ideas of power, overturning expectations through love, compassion, and service, rather than military might or political control. The letter's portrayal underlines that tension, highlighting how Jesus unsettled established structures precisely through his unexpected form and message. In this letter, prophecy and testimony kind of blend together, and it paints this kind of picture of someone whose presence felt transformative, not because it was distant or lofty, but because it stayed reachable and genuine. That still matches the gospel stories where Jesus reaches out to the marginalized, touches those others wouldn't even look at, and somehow sees people completely when society refused to. His humility wasn't weakness. It became this deep power and also an invitation. The imagery in the letter nudges you toward a paradox: Jesus' freedom while he's still physically chained. I mean, he's bound and condemned, yet he shows a liberty Pilate just couldn't grasp or govern. Somehow, this paradoxical sovereignty lands right where the prophetic vision points: the suffering servant who carries divine authority but doesn't grab for worldly dominance. For early Christians, this was revolutionary. It rearranged their ideas of messiahship and shifted religious faith toward lived encounter rather than conquest. So the letter works as a kind of testimony of that change, emphasizing how Jesus lived out a prophecy that pushed against cultural customs and political power at the same time. And the link to prophecy keeps pressing on the reader. Because Jesus' identity keeps refusing easy sorting, it won't fit neatly into one box. It invites believers and skeptics alike to wrestle, not just with facts, but with bigger issues of power, justice, and truth. The letter really captures that feeling of a man who is both ordinary and extraordinary, fulfilling ancient words while also opening new roads for understanding. Understanding these connections prepares us to consider how Pilate's own legacy became entwined with this story. Pilate's legacy and the letter's impact.
According to the Gospels, Pilate condemned Jesus on the accusation of the Jews, and then washed his hands of the whole affair.
Pontius Pilate remains one of history's most paradoxical figures. Though best known as the Roman governor who sentenced Jesus to death, his name echoes far beyond that grim decision. Pilate's letter, whether authentic or not, reveals a man caught in a profound moral struggle, torn between duty, fear, and an unsettling recognition of innocence. This tension, preserved and passed down for centuries, shows a man wrestling with the weight of his choices in a moment that changed the world forever. What makes Pilate so fascinating is how his story highlights the cost of truth when confronted with political pressure. The letter suggests he acknowledged Jesus' innocence openly, 3 times before witnesses, yet still surrendered to the demands of a hostile crowd. His famous hand-washing gesture symbolizes an attempt to remove responsibility, but no outward act could erase the burden he carried. This gesture, ingrained in culture as a sign of denial, actually points to the deeper human conflict of choosing fear over conscience. Over 2,000 years later, Pilate's legacy is complex. He is neither a hero nor a villain in simple terms, but a symbol of hesitation and moral ambiguity. His failure to act on what he recognized illuminates a universal human tragedy: the cost of standing with truth in a world rife with compromise and fear. The letter attributed to him deepens this portrait, showing a man who saw and described something extraordinary, yet never fully embraced it. The letter's lasting impact extends beyond historical curiosity. It forms part of a Christian creed recited by billions. He suffered under Pontius Pilate. Pilate's presence in this confession ensures his role is forever entwined with the story of Jesus' passion. Yet, through the letter, we glimpse a more nuanced man, one who was both judge and spectator, participant and prisoner of his own doubts. More importantly, Pilate's letter invites modern readers to face their own moral crossroads. How often do people recognize profound truths, yet hold back because of fear, comfort, or the cost of conviction? The letter's message remains a mirror reflecting our struggles with courage and responsibility. It challenges us to move beyond mere acknowledgement toward authentic belief and action. The letter also adds to a more richer humanization of Jesus. It does something kind of personal, not just in theory. It portrays him not as a faraway mythical person, but as someone who made a deep impression even on a hardened Roman official. Pilate's inability to place Jesus into a neat category reminds us that truth often resists our expectations and slips past ordinary labels. It shows that the encounter with Jesus isn't just something historical, it is profoundly personal, and it reshapes you in a quiet but real way. And still, this lasting fascination with Pilate's narrative shows how history and faith overlap, where human weakness meets divine purpose. The letter gives voice to the struggle between political power and spiritual authority. It even highlights the cost and the intricacy of truth in a world that often tries to silence it. Pilate's story turns into both a warning and an invitation to look beyond mere appearances and toward the deeper reality underneath all that. Also, the fact that this letter survives and keeps provoking questions points to this mysterious force it has. It reveals a face of Jesus that no simple description can really hold. You see him as both fully human and fully divine, and somehow his presence unsettled rulers while also comforting the broken. Pilate's attempt to translate that face into words falls short. It doesn't manage to confine its fullness, so it reminds us that some truths are more deeply felt than they are ever fully expressed. Thank you for joining this journey into Pilate's letter and the mysterious face of Jesus it reveals. This story reminds us that truth often hides in unexpected places, challenging us to see beyond appearances and wrestle with our own response. If this video made you think, please like and subscribe so you won't miss future explorations like this. See you next time.